What if when you woke up this morning, you realized your entire past life had been just one dream?
You're one node in a network of 7.5 billion nodes. That network is interwoven with countless other networks on Earth.
You can say some words, and it can cause heaven or hell on Earth.
To find others like we and help them become the heroes of their own lives.
Join us. Together we will find more power.
Join us, join us. We are GodXP.
We are GodXP. Level up your spirit.
Together we will find more power. And I'm Anthony Polanco.
It's funny you said people stand up. My intern asked me a couple of weeks ago, he said, no offense, Wiley, but why are you the guy doing this? And I started laughing and I said, I ask myself that all the time. But the answer is because...
What if when you woke up this morning, you realized your entire past life had been just one dream?
You're one node in a network of 7.5 billion nodes. That network is interwoven with countless other networks on Earth.
You can say some words, and it can cause heaven or hell on Earth.
To find others like we and help them become the heroes of their own lives.
Join us. Together we will find more power.
Join us, join us. We are GodXP.
We are GodXP. Level up your spirit.
Together we will find more power. And I'm Anthony Polanco.
It's funny you said people stand up. My intern asked me a couple of weeks ago, he said, no offense, Wiley, but why are you the guy doing this? And I started laughing and I said, I ask myself that all the time. But the answer is because this didn't exist when I had to find my answers. And the truth is, I ask myself every day in my programming, am I developing and delivering for these participants what I wish I had in those experiences myself? What could have catalyzed this growth better? What could have maybe buoyed my own processing of this information in real time? And that's what we try to do with our programming, is really provide a container so that healing can take root and then support that long term. Fellowship for us is 6 months, and it represents 12 modules of curriculum delivered over about 161 days. And it's something that we work very hard to make sure is not just accessible, but that's also authentic. And that's something that you can't do unless I greatly and hugely believe that healing happens in community, and it doesn't take any data for me to see that. I saw that in real time.
Yeah.
So at this point, it's just a question of, can we gather all the data so everyone else can see it?
Meditation. Gotta do it.
Totally. Obviously, meditation is a common recommendation, a common advice, but it's fascinating that no matter who I talk to, it is an essential component, regardless of their modality of spiritual pursuit. And it's something I advocate more than anything, and I just think it is a beautiful partner to psychedelics, and yeah, just it feels like an essential. I don't want to give prescriptions for other people's experience, but it seemed universally beneficial for all people. Maybe some people are having an experience with much less suffering and have a purpose here different than my own. But I would suggest that if you are suffering and questioning the meaning of your suffering, then meditation is a wonderful tool that you really can't go without.
Yeah, I think same goes for me. I think I'd put in that category, like, nothing bad can come from being in nature too. And I believe the same for meditation. It's like nothing negative can come from meditation. I think with psychedelics and plant medicines, they're actually not for everyone. Some people's psyche or being is just in some way maybe not ready for that experience, or not quite in the place that is a healthy place to be for that experience. And meditation, I would say, that is actually not true. Meditation is a one size fits all. I really think that, yeah, it can't be emphasized enough that it brings so much peace, but also just so much emphasis of how complex the human experience is, and how much we actually are these, like, change is everything, right? And self is illusory, and there's all these things that help actually liberate us from a lot of our suffering and a lot of our pain. just by sitting with that experience of, wow, everything is actually just constant change, including the way I see myself, the way I see others. It's all transient, it's all passing. And that's so liberating. And it's one of the best ways to get to that experience.
So tell me about your I saw that you had a training coming up, understanding spiritual warfare from a psychological perspective. Could you tell me more about that? Like just kind of about what gave you the idea of creating the course? It's for people in ministry mostly, right?
It could be for anybody, but I was starting it for people in ministry because I want to correlate the language, right? Because like I said a minute ago, the Bible would call it a stronghold, a belief system, and psychology would call it a belief system, right? And there's so many of those things where I can give scriptural reference to things that I talk about in psychology. For example, intrusive thoughts. Intrusive thoughts are a big word in the psychology field, right? Especially when it comes to obsessive compulsive disorder, all sorts of things. And then the Bible would call it the fiery darts of the devil, right? The thoughts that are trying to come in to plant a seed, because if that seed grows, if we ruminate on a thought long enough, it becomes a belief. That's where suicide ideation comes in, right? And so I tell a couple stories on my website about my own experience with that and how I knew that it wasn't my original thought. It came from outside of me. But so I just wanted to sort of merge the two, Christianity language and psychology language, and help people understand how to bridge that gap. Because I'll never forget, I worked in suicide for 3 years. And I went to a completed death of a 45-year-old female who went to church every single week. And she ended up committing suicide. And I walked away from that experience thinking to myself, how does this happen? We sit in a pew at church every Sunday and we still take our own life. There's something missing in that, you know? And so I feel like you said a few minutes ago, that most pastors can only do so much when it comes to counseling. But my purpose in trying to offer this training is I'm only one person and my schedule is full. I can't really take any more clients until someone transitions out. And so who's dealing with all these people that are really struggling? And the pandemic has really raised people's needs for help, and the phone is ringing off the hook. And most therapists that I know are full. So I'm trying to get information in the hands of people who would also be seeing people to help them and maybe have some new language or understanding.
Yo, thank you for watching the GodXP Spiritual Fitness Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe if you like premium content just like this. Turn on them post notifications. There's more coming soon. I'll see you then. Is there a certain medicine that corporations are trying to latch onto, like ketamine or MDMA, or where do you see the battle really taking place in that, as far as like small startups and small communities versus large industry?
Yeah, that is literally the battle lines. It's community versus industry. And I think that right now, the things that are in play the hardest on the organizational side for the industry aspect of that argument would certainly be around anything that's created in a lab or anything that they can synthesize immediately. So advantage ketamine, advantage MDMA. They absolutely want to own the means of production and distribution for these life-saving medicines. And as we've seen anything from insulin or anything else in our current, there will be absolutely no expense spared on the participant themselves. And it really brings into question access and equity. And I think that both of those things are hugely important. I speak a lot publicly. I'm either at conferences or speaking to whoever. I try to take every opportunity to educate that I can, within reason. I'm very busy. And I see who buys tickets to these things. And I see who is on the roster along with me sometimes. And I just had a conference a couple of weeks ago where everyone but me was like, honestly, like a shark. Like I was on that call and they were talking about profit margins and data acquisition in the sense of IP control. And I got angry.
Yeah.
I literally got angry during the call, during the conference. And somebody asked me about data collection and the monetization of data collection. And I was furious. And I said, I don't work like this whatsoever. I'm in the business of saving lives. I'm in the business of helping people find a real path for recovery. So when you ask me how do I gather information or what are my data points, they're going to be in regards to people's reaction and recovery from trauma. And I'm not trying to steal an IP. I'm not trying to copyright for whatever's sake the intellectual property of what really is like not a big leap either. If you think that talk therapy is valuable, all right. If you think psychedelic talk therapy is valuable, fantastic. Do you think group therapy is valuable? If it is, then psychedelic group therapy isn't too far behind. I'm always surprised more places aren't doing it. It's a fantastic model for both recovery and connection. And that's strictly what we try to do at Veterans of War.
That's amazing. This is the last question I have for you, but I've got a nephew. He's an active Marine right now, serving in Japan. And just having this conversation with you, I think about him. I think about the experiences he'll have during his service, coming back and integrating into society. Such a good dude. And if you had advice for young Marines today who are active and expecting to one day reintegrate into society, like what's your advice, what's your chief advice to the Marines listening right now on how to navigate their individual narrative of their life when they're done serving, when they experience some loss and suffering? What's your advice to that person?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. A couple of things. Firstly, when you get out, the separation between who you were when you served and how society sees you is going to change. And for many veterans, that comes with it a sense of a loss of identity. I would highly encourage you to find communities that you care about. We're taught in the Marines again and again to suck it up when we have a problem, which is to say to keep marching forward, complete the mission, and worry about yourself later. But too often, later never comes. You must, to be successful, be proactive with your mental health. Stigma be damned. It's your life on the line. And one of the things that I would encourage, it's the same route I went, would be to see the VA, to make sure that if nothing else, that you get documented what has changed for you. And because we're battling that suck it up mentality, I'll say clearly from my perspective that you can't outthink the physical changes in your brain if you're experiencing post-traumatic stress. The way that your brain operates literally is different. There's been damage. There is hope on the horizon. There is a path to recovery. There are several, but you must be proactive in searching them out. I will say if you're really suffering, if you're on the edge because of failure of your own support structures or some awful trauma that's added to the awful traumas you've already collected and you feel like that there's no other hope for recovery, there absolutely is. And it is absolutely difficult. I can't stress enough that it will be hard. But if at the end of the day, you're wrestling with the idea of if you've lost the fear of death enough that you're contemplating suicide, then what the hell have you got to lose taking a chance on something like this? That's how I got into it, to be absolutely honest with you. I was suicidal and I thought if I don't change something, I'm going to make a bad decision. So I'm saying to you proactively, if you ever get to that place, look up Veterans of War. Look up the benefits of psychedelic healing. Look up Johns Hopkins. Look up Oxford and Georgetown medical libraries and find the compelling body of evidence that's growing that our relationship to medicine and to each other may be drastically more interconnected than we ever thought.
Said. Amen. Amen. Wiley, I appreciate you, man. I'm looking forward to continuing following your story. If anyone wants to support, please go to veteransofwar.org/donate and follow Wiley Gray and follow Veterans of War online everywhere. And yeah, just bless you in your quest, man.
Thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it, man.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the GodXP podcast with Wiley Gray. Thank you so much for joining us.
What if when you woke up this morning, you realized your entire past life had been just one dream? You wake up this morning as a 25-year-old or a 35 or 15 or 55, whatever age you are now, and it's the first day of your life. You get a do-over on all the mistakes you've made in your past because it was just a dream. The money in your bank account, the family and friends, the standing health you either have or don't have is your starting balance. But there's one more tool in your arsenal as you take on your new life that just began today. You now have a direct connection with the creator of this reality. How would that change the decisions you make as you go forth in pursuit of happiness to obtain your fairy tale life? If every decision you made from now on was directly inspired by the creator of the universe, how would the rest of your day be different? What would tomorrow look like? How about 10 years from now? Join us. Together, we will find more power.
If you don't pick up a baby, it will die. Even if you provide it everything else, we need contact as a species. We thrive in contact with each other. And that's harder and harder to do, it seems like. We had this grand idea of what the technological revolution would provide us. And instead of being this utopia where everyone's connected and feels unified on a front, there's this great dissolution of information where everyone is siloed in their beliefs, which are only reinforced in echo chambers that echo to eternity. And what's coming out of that is incredibly toxic. One of the things, I always take a deep breath when I get off the plane in the jungle in the Amazon. There's a moment where you literally step out and it's like a wave of heat hits you. It's immediate. Poof, hits you right in the face. But the air is so thick with oxygen, you almost need a spoon to breathe it. And it's so quiet. We don't realize like all the radio waves and the Wi-Fi and like we're everything around us is energetically so loud. And when I go to the jungle, that's all gone. And the jungle's loud with a different energy. Don't get me wrong. The jungle's like terrifying in different ways and should be respected and revered. But it's a much more connected and intimate kind of energy. And I think we really have divorced ourselves from that really efficiently for the last 200 years in the West. Much to our great dismay, I think, long-term as a species. Our planet is hurting right now. I tell you, it might be the end of civilization as we know it, but the people living like the Shipibo in the jungle in the Amazon basin, they're going to make it. They're going to be just fine. Maybe not just fine. That's a bit of a stretch. But there's a real connectedness to the way that they live life that I envy, clearly. Yeah. And bringing people to that experience, not just for the medicine aspect, is beautiful, but it always reminds me of how necessary it is to have here in North America, to have a beautiful connected space that our indigenous people have tried desperately to keep alive from every corner of the United States. We have to have some places that are sanctuaries, and we have to defend them with our teeth and our nails if necessary. Blood, sweat, and tears might have to be what you need in order to really reclaim any sense of connectivity or recovery in this life. Yeah. We're working hard to do just that.
I think it's so unfortunate how few people realize the tax of traffic noise on the psyche and just your emotional state. I realize how living in the city, how little time I have in silence. I even have to turn brown noise on at night to sleep just because the noise of hearing cars drive past or hearing people talking constantly, it's just, you can't really get a moment's peace. No one can. It's just always noise, always activity and action, human action. It's an energy tax. It really is. And if you live in a city and you've lived in a city for years, you don't even realize how much of your emotional capacity is being drained by just your environment.
Just being. Yeah, Exactly. No, that's the palpable moment for me every time I get off the plane is you can just be here. And isn't it amazing how there's always enough oxygen? Like you can take a deep breath in here and there's plenty. There's no dirt or soot in the air. You're in the lungs of the planet. Let's be real. If you're trying to find a cleaner source of air, I defy you to find it. It would be artificially created for sure.
Yeah. There's this certain feeling that you get where it's like when I was young, I used to go to a winter camp with my church youth group for a weekend. And it was like this ecstatic experience in the middle. And when you get there, you still feel the school dramas and everything spilling in. But then you lose yourself in the experience. And then when it's time to come home, you realize, I can't take this home with me. And when I get to school, my friends are still going to be cursing and talking nasty and insulting me. And the spiritual experience does not continue into the real world as I was experiencing it. And a psychedelic experience can be like this. You are finally free from your heavy baggage, but then you come back and your bags are still sitting there. And so you have to figure out which of these bags am I going to throw away? And which ones am I going to unpack and where am I going to put them? I'm not going to put them where I used to. And so sometimes the transformations we think that we're going to have, it's not that dramatic, but just like you said, just behavior or perspective, it makes the difference between pain and bliss is really perspective. And so to change your perspective can be to transform pain into bliss in your life experience.
That is so good. I love how you said that, just in terms of, yes, everything is just how we're framing it. Everything is how we're seeing something. Some person can see the exact same thing as us and we can have completely different experiences of it. We know that as humans. We're seeing through a certain lens with all different areas and domains and facets of our lives. And sometimes, you're just putting on an entirely new set of glasses and you're like, what am I going to do now? I have a completely different set of glasses on now. Like, how does that work in the context of my life? And that's kind of part of the fun puzzle. And I think it's like a gift to be able to have a new perspective, even if it's confusing and you're wondering, now what? It's a gift, because a shift in perspective and having psychological flexibility is a huge part of well-being. Like being able to shift and see and take perspectives easily and with excitement and curiosity is so important just for having a rich life, having a meaningful, rich life. And it can be, I think what you're speaking to is really important, which is that it can be really like confusing to come back with all those teachings and then just be in the same exact environment, which is part of the practice of integration, part of any spiritual practice really is, okay, now I have this new wisdom, or now I have this new way of being, or I have this new way that I want to be, but I'm still in my same environment. So how can I be that? And perhaps that will shift people's perspectives around me, or it will shift things around me just by being that and applying those teachings. But it can be tough, especially with certain environments that are very rigid or fixed in some way.
Absolutely. So you've been able to facilitate one of these or multiple, you've done one of these cohorts already?
Right. Yeah. So our first cohort completed November 6th, and that represented about, 22 months total of programming. When they initially formed, it was in April of 2020, and then COVID by July, when they were supposed to go have medicine, absolutely shifted everything to the right. That was a terrifying time as the executive director of Veterans of War. I had to look at these participants week in and week out and decide two things. Firstly, do I continue this curriculum? Do I continue holding this space because I didn't budget for it? This was a set program. The nonprofit world has very tight margins, as you can imagine. And then the second thing I had to figure out was, what do I do when I can't get my guys to the medicine? What happens when I have somebody that's actively suicidal, that's done all the right work, that's done all the preparation, but for whatever reason, I have, again, due to prohibition, no access to life-saving medicine? It became a real ethical quandary for me. I immediately decided to carry on and continue the container. I thought that was critically important for that team. I think that was one of the best hunches I've ever had. It was great. What it really did, one of the guys said later, was that it was his backbone during the pandemic, and that it gave him something to look forward to every 2 weeks. That's huge. That's the same guy that when I called him literally had a gun in his lap. It's been a very, I think, challenging journey, but I think challenging is the right word. I think that we've been flexible in the face of these adversities, but ultimately the pressure point was exposed, which is that what do you do when you can't get to the medicine? And the result on our end was we need to create a place here in America where we can do that. So ultimately what we've done is we've gotten our feet and our little thumbs in all the little pies all over the United States, having to do with either decrim or legalization of entheogens, of this specific class of medicines that I work with my nonprofit. We've had some success. Oregon was fantastic, and they are trying to figure out now over the next couple of years how they're going to manage a largely decriminalized psychedelic space. But there looks to be some opportunities in Virginia and in California and in Hawaii and Florida and many others. So everywhere that those things have popped up, we've endorsed it wholeheartedly. In fact, Veterans of War is going to testify in front of the Virginia Assembly of Congress on the 9th. And then the second prong of that attack is, now that we have a couple places established, is the ground fertile enough to... So we're tentatively looking at right now Eastern Oregon for a Veterans of War healing center. And what this aims to provide is not just the community focal point for this work, but an access point for this work that will have the best interests of the participants in mind. If we don't create these spaces organically, if we're not able to crowdfund or support from wherever we need to find it, these things, the truth of the matter is the big corporations are going to step in and profitize it and monetize it and capitalize it like we are very good at in this market. So it's really in our best interest to take ownership of this space before it gets too fleshed out. So Veterans of War absolutely sees itself as a warden in the growth of this emerging industry. And what we really want to do, again, is show the efficacy of these modalities long term. If we can prove that in veterans, I think that it doesn't take a leap of faith or rocket science to apply it to the general public at large, especially in compromised communities like first responders.
Yeah. So do you feel like in what ways do you see that big industry is trying to advance the narrative in their favor?
Welcome to Death Mastery. Death has an appointment with you, and he's asked me to help you get ready. The object of this game is to overcome your fear of death so that you can achieve your highest potential, fulfill your life purpose, accomplish your dreams. To pass the levels, you'll simply practice meditations in a specific way and then answer some writing questions about your life afterward. This game can be played all by yourself, or the third component is you can also join live sessions with your fellowship mates, which will be small. Once you've completed the game, you'll receive your Death XP badge and your complete existential roadmap, which Death will be happy to see should he show up early, heaven forbid. See, the procrastination and the time wasting and the general excuse making for why life didn't go your way, that kind of thing really annoys Death. It's much easier to negotiate for more time once you've overcome your fear, and this game is designed to help you do just that. The next game starts mid-January. It's 1 week long, and for a limited time, it's free to play. So, if this interests you, click the link below to get started. I'm Death's doorman, unofficially, and I'll be the facilitator for this game. I'm looking forward to seeing you inside. Welcome to the game.